we're a husband and wife partnership. My wife Laura actually got into beekeeping before me. She did the diploma in certificate in apiculture through Telford 6 or so years ago, and she was trained as a queen rearer with Taylor Pass Honey, so did several years there. Then at Paddy locally we both worked for, where I come under the great tutelage of Phil Burko, and so he actually trained me. So anything which is wrong today, you know where to look. Blame him. Yeah, so that's sort of my entry into the industry, and we launched our business in about 2016-17, sort of soon after I started beekeeping. But we do a bit of pollination around town here as well, but also a bit of queen rearing. In terms of, we are commercial queen rearers obviously, but we are on a smaller scale in New Zealand. Some people do it on quite a big scale, but we just supply hundreds to the industry a year to other beekeepers. We send them out through the mail. The beekeepers all around New Zealand, so we do a few, and Laura is well trained. Chuck questions at me as we go. We also actually produce a beekeeping e-magazine and website, which is free, and that I used to work at the Marlborough Express before I got into beekeeping, so I've done a bit of writing. So if you aren't already, you can subscribe to our magazine for free, and it's got all sorts of beekeeping stories in it. It comes out on the email each month in just electronic form. But we do have a print magazine actually coming out next month, if you're interested. So we'll straight into the good stuff, as I say there, the mating process. I'll start here, but then things will make more sense as we jump back and forward a bit as we go. You've got to start somewhere, I guess. So I assume we all know what queen cells are, and your queen will emerge from the cell in your hive, and when she does, she attempts to kill off any virgin queens or any other queen cells that are in the hive. So that's her first job, and then obviously, like any emerged bee, the same as workers, they have to be fed up, so they get a bit of bee bread and that sort of thing, maybe even a bit of royal jelly as well. And she builds up strength for a few days, and then before she goes out and mates on the wing, as we can see in the rather pornographic picture at the bottom, she has to do some orientation flights. So, as I say, to make a bit more sense later on, but we have smaller hives are based in called mating units, but she will go out the door after a few days on a good sunny day, obviously, and do an orientation flight to get her location so she knows where home is. And after a few days of that sort of thing, which usually does 2 orientation flights, you sort of hope for good weather, and both the drones and her can get out and fly and mate on the wing. Obviously there's a bit of a process, you're doing the grafts and whatnot before you get your virgin queen, so we'll get to that. The drones, as you see, I've got the 13 degrees and the 18 degrees up there. Worker bees fly at about 13 degrees, as you probably notice in your hives, and the temperature's around about there, but the drones won't fly to 18 degrees, so you do actually need decent weather to get successful matings, because she will mate with between sort of a dozen or more drones, 24 sort of drones, so you need decent weather to get the drones flying, which is key, as well as obviously preventing your virgin getting lost. She has to come home after her mating. Mating process can be completed within days. Once you start getting your warm spring weather, it's amazing how quick they do mate if you go back and check your hives, but typically if the weather's a little bit cooler in spring, they extend it over a sort of period of a week or 2. And that's a key period where you really are weather dependent. So a big part of our business selling these queens is weather dependent on it, and I mean it's the same in any beehive. If I'm superseding or anything, you really are dependent on the weather to get that good mating and good queen. So it's fraught. When she mates on the wing like that, she can store millions of sperm in her spermatheca, which is sort of a little round sac inside her, and in there, when she lays eggs back in the hive over the coming years, if she wants to lay a fertilised egg, yeah, she can fertilise it with one of those sperm, and if she wants to lay an unfertilised egg, that's a drone. She just avoids sort of brushing it past the sperm and fecal. I think we'll see how the sound goes. That's an audio track I just found online this morning of it's called piping or beeping, which is what a virgin does when she first hatches out of her cell to let the hive know she's there. So as we know, the bees have got their own sort of language for all sorts of things, including the waggle dance. Well, one really interesting thing is, when a virgin queen emerges, she needs to let the hive know she's there. Or I don't think there's been conclusive research into exactly what it is. It might also be sort of it's to assert her dominance, because as I say, she will go and kill other queens, virgin queens herself. So anyway, this is, if you hear this beeping sound in your hive, chances are there's a virgin. Although I do remember working with Phil one day, and I said to Phil, how come this hive's beeping? We went over and looked at it, and we couldn't see who was beeping, but we thought it was we tried to figure it out. I think it was one of the worker bees was randomly making a beep as well. So I don't know if you remember that, Phil, but bees talk in all sorts of different ways, but definitely virgins make this sort of weird piping or beeping sound. So let's see how this goes. So when to requeen, I guess this sort of thing is key for all sorts of beekeeping, not just when we're trying to raise queens commercially. When you need a population of mature drones to ensure adequate mating. So that's, if you're putting cells in, like before we start our process of breeding up queens in springtime, it's usually about, we put our first cells out in the hives to hatch as virgins in about the first week of September, second week of September. You really need warm enough weather and enough of a flow that your hives, your queens laying fresh drones, to then mate with your virgin queens. There's no point putting a cell out in winter, sort of like we were talking about before. There's no point trying to save a hive, this late in the season, because things just wind down over winter. There's not enough drones around to mate with them anyway. Even once you start seeing drones in a hive, which might be late August, you get a good flow, the queen starts laying some drones. It actually takes about 16 days for them to mature and be producing sperm. So even once you see drones, you've got to check them, and there's quite a cool trick you can do. Not nice and report drones, but they tend to live a fraught existence anyway, but you pick them up and you can squeeze the sides of them, and drones don't sting you, so you don't need to be very careful about handling them. Pick them up and you squeeze the sides of them, and their penis shoots out the back, and you can actually see if it's mature or not. I haven't got a video of that, unfortunately, but it is something you can do, and if more experienced beekeepers with you, I guess they can show you, but you can even try it yourself. But in summer, a lot of the drones will be mature. Obviously, they might have been around a while, so you can try it, and it's quite interesting what sort of pops out the back of it. So what have I got there? Different times to requeen. So if you requeen in spring, and this could be you're putting a cell in or putting a mated cage queen in, sort of like we're going to go into. Because everyone does it different, even commercials do it different. Some people will requeen mated queens, some will just go around and put cells in. But the time of year is key. In springtime, as I say, it does provide a young queen for the upcoming swarming season and the honey flow, which is obviously ideal. Young queen is less likely to swarm, far less likely to swarm, and obviously she should be a good, better layer for the honey flow, which is what you want to get a nice strong hive. So that is ideal, but as we know in New Zealand, spring weather can be a bit fraught, so harder to get maidens. In summer, it's interesting. I don't really know anyone who does big summer requeening other than some people. You do. Putting out cells, I assume.
It was part of my organic rotation.
What does that mean?
It meant I needed a brood break, so I quickly cleaned.
Yes. But actually a lot of people do put cells in and say straight after the honey flow, protected cells, which will then definitely hatch out. The hive can't tear the cell down if you protect it with some tape or something. but that's more sort of what I consider autumn.
Mm.
Yeah, beekeepers are busy usually, obviously harvesting honey in sort of January, so they don't tend to requeen there. And it's interesting, I mean, I've got juries out there on sometimes the hive sort of don't want to bother raising a queen in the honey flow. Sometimes they're so busy, and I think possibly it's the nurse bees get pushed into being foragers so quickly, there's sort of less of them around to really encourage, you know, supersedure and cell raising, and that's not scientific, it's just, yeah, a bit of an observation. So anyway, most beekeepers go spring or autumn for the requeening, and autumn, as I say, it's a good time to put cells out because usually you've got some settled hot weather still. But you do need to monitor the drones, especially the last few years in Marlborough, we've had dry Januaries. We know that clover and borage burns off in a lot of the sort of pasture areas. The hives will start tossing drones out early because they just run out of forage to feed them. So yeah, we don't like to sort of put cells in too late into March because your percentage comes down. They will still mate, but just from a percentage, which obviously commercially we rely on high percentages, it does, yeah, definitely does come down in a dry year. That's what I've got next. Alright, so we'll go into the actual steps sort of we go through from getting a cell, preparing a hive, getting a cell, or cells, and then putting them into mating units, and then how we cage a male queen for either our own use or other beekeepers. Step one, selecting a breeder queen. Effectively your stud queen. I mean, I'll talk through the process here, but we're going to graft hundreds, possibly even thousands of cells out of some of these breeder queens. So she really is, as you know, she's only providing half the genetics because the drones in an open mating system, as we use, mating on the wing, will provide the other half. But I mean, if she's supplying half your genetics, obviously you need to get a really good one. So she's your stud queen, effectively, and you can have multiple. We have multiple to give genetic diversity. If you are constantly breeding from the same queen and putting 50% genetics, back into your own operation continuously, you're going to run into inbreeding problems, potentially. It's not so bad around Marlborough, there's so many hives these days, but you do get quite a diversity. But if you were doing it in a remoter area and just using one breeder queen, you might run into issues. So we have several. Everyone has their own criteria for selecting them, but you want to make it a young queen ideally. And I mean, that's, ideally, but sometimes, should be.
So under hygiene, hygiene for what?
Yeah, so it's bee health and hygiene. So hygiene can be assessed in various different ways. A simple way is to see how clean they keep the hive. So if they don't have a lot of debris around the hive or anything, they actually drag stuff out, that tends to be a trait that they are good at sort of cleaning up disease as well. They'll clean up diseased cells and things like that. They might be more inclined to remove varroa. A lot of people include your ability to clean up varroa under hygiene. But yeah, it's a lot of disease cleanup really. One way you can assess it is you actually freeze a circle of brood in your queen, and then you come back in. I've never done it, but I think you come back in 40. You check it over a period of time and see how many of those, because with liquid nitrogen, you've frozen the bees under the cap, so it should remove them because they're dead. A good hive will remove them quicker than a less hygienic hive. So you can actually do an assessment as to how quickly your hive removes those dead bees under the brood cap. So that's one way to assess your hygiene. Just cleaning out dead stuff that shouldn't be in the hive, basically.
The other option is an entomologist pin if you don't have the liquid hydrogen and going in and killing each individual brood that in a certain area. And
I understand you do check it over, you check it in 48 hours, in 72 hours, and then so on. So you do a bit of a check, because some will clean it out a lot quickly, but then maybe not more longer term. So anyway, we won't go into details of it too much, but you can assess it more scientifically like that. But a good way is just to look how clean they're keeping the hive we do it in springtime before we're going to need our breeder queens, and see how clean they're keeping the hive over winter, see how much varroa damage you think there is, these days it's not hard to find a hive damaged by varroa, so yeah, you want to try and obviously select the ones that don't look to have had any varroa damage. Yeah, temperament's a big one, and we do, I should have said from the top, we do Italian queens, like a lot of New Zealand beekeepers do. They tend to have good temperament. Laying pattern's huge, like those photos there. Breeder queens are close to it, I assume, because they've got really good laying patterns. Honey collection, obviously really important, especially in a commercial sense. If you're selling it to commercial guys, that's key. Swarming tendencies, yeah, you want to keep track of what hives have swarmed one way or another, and yeah, don't be breeding from any that are inclined to, because that is genetic trait. And then you have strain specifics, like in our instance, yeah, it's a bit of a controversial one in that you don't want to be culling too many queens out on colour. Italian bees are the yellow ones, so we want them to be reasonably yellow, and that our buyers do want Italian bees. And so in a smaller sort of hobbyist setting, it's not so important. You probably don't mind what your queen looks like in terms of colour, but yeah, that's one the commercial sort of debate over, and that you could have a really good queen, but you can't breed from her that much because she's got a bit of a black bum, you know, she's throwing too much black, and so you are effectively losing some good genetics potentially by culling on colour, which you shouldn't really. So it's a bit of one that's debated a little bit within industry. So once you've chosen what queen you want to breed from, or you know, in a commercial sense, queens, you've got to get the cell raiser hive. So you're going to, and we'll get to it in more detail in a minute, but you're going to conduct a graft with your grafting tool and put your eggs from your breeder queen into your grafting frame. But that grafting frame then needs to go into a really strong hive to build out nice big queen cells. So that's a photo, oh no, sorry, it's on the next slide. But we have a lot of doubles for doing it, and most beekeepers use strong double brood box hives. And there's various processes for grafting, but yeah, you really want to have strong colonies for them to go into, capable of raising well-fed queens. Yeah, different styles of trying to get those well-fed queens, but all of them utilise the hive's two responses to not having a queen or not having an adequate queen, as they see it. That is an emergency response to raise a cell, or their supersedure response. And so in our processes, yeah, we tend to use a mix of both to try and get the best cell. I'll possibly go into that a bit more in a minute. But yeah, as part of preparing your double brood box hive, the day before you want to graft, what we do is we go through the hive, and this is sort of a part of the process which takes a bit of time, especially when we're quite strong in summer. You've got to find the queen, and you put her in your bottom box with mainly sort of capped brood. Then you set your top box up with a lot of uncapped brood, which will have nurse bees on it, because of course the nurse bees are feeding the young larvae under there. And honey and decent honey and pollen on the outside, like you should always set a hive up. And you either always have 9 frames in that box, or you take one out because your cell bar is going to end up in there eventually. So you make sure it's only got 9 sort of frames in it. Actually, what you can do that 24 hours before is put your empty cells in there for the bees to sort of clean the cells up and prepare it. Because obviously, most people use plastic cell cups, and especially if you've got brand new ones, you know, the plastic out of the factory. So it's good to give the bees a chance to, you know, clean them up, polish them, we say, and get them how they like them. So you can put that in, 24 hours before. Your queens down below, you put an excluder in, and then you put your top box with your uncapped brood, a little bit of honey and pollen in there. And the idea there is your cell bar, once you do your graft and put your eggs in there, is going to go in the middle of all that uncapped brood before the nurse bees. And obviously it's the nurse bees which are going to feed up your egg with your larvae with royal jelly and grow out a nice big healthy cell. So yeah, you want them around it, nearby to it. You also want the honey and the pollen up there so they can digest it to make the royal jelly. So yeah, that's the sort of thing that you want to get right for best results, and it takes a bit of learning, how to assess different frames and get the right frames up there.
Do you use a cloak wall?
No, I was actually going to get to that. I said to Laura today, what if someone asked about a cloak board and we've done it? Have you used it, Phil?
No.
No. Like I said, there's lots of different processes. We use one which I don't really know anybody else is using, which I'll probably get to in a minute. But yeah, there's lots of different processes. But as I say, they all usually start with a queenless hive or making the bees think they're queenless. So then they're really like, geez, we need a new queen, we want to feed up these cells to get a new queen. And they give them a lot of royal jelly. And then the idea then is they usually go into another hive or you manipulate your hive. So then the queen is there, but there's the queen excluded between, like I've just explained, and they'll feed the cell up in a supersedure response. So that is, they know there's a queen there, but because of pheromones aren't getting carried through the queen excluder that well by bees, it sort of impinges their progress, or she can't get up there to carry her pheromones up. Then they think, oh, she's getting weak, I can't smell her very well, we better feed up some cells.
Yep.
So that's sort of the difference between emergency and supersedure. Supersedure, they can still sort of smell her pheromones, but they think, oh, the pheromones aren't strong enough, she must be getting old and not laying enough. So we'll keep feeding these cells up that we've found. So the cloak board is, may as well go into it now a little bit, as I understand it, you cover, actually I've got a photo of it later on, so we'll go into it then, it'll be easier to describe. Yeah, David's will graph locate the queen, yep, so we'll go into all that. So you've got your hive set up 24 hours before, you'll then go into it the next day and place your graft in it. So yeah, there's a photo of our cell raising yard. I just put that on to see lots of doubles. We do it from home because it's a bit of a fiddly task. It's quite good to be able to do it from home, different times of the day, just duck out and do it. But yeah, most commercial operators will just have a yard like that somewhere where there's good flows, especially in springtime, because you want your bees on a good flow to feed up those cells.
And that means pollen sources as well as nectar?
Definitely, because they're feeding royal jelly, which is a combination of the both, so they need the carbohydrates and the pollen source as well. We do, where we're located, we're up for Hopi Valley, so opposite the spy base. There's a lot of hives around that area, which is great for mating units, because it means there's a lot of drones to mate with your virgins, but it also means it is hard to find a good spring flow, so we end up having to do a lot of supplementary feeding, and part of that is pollen supplements, because they need the sugar syrup and also pollen supplements to make up the royal jelly. That's a cloak board set up, and this is actually, before I got into beekeeping, although Laura had for a few years, we went on a bit of a holiday, and this was in Ireland, and I've got a distant cousin who's actually one of the bigger beekeepers in Ireland. He's got all of 250 hives, but she's a bit of a boutique industry over there, so he was it. And that's a cloak board setup he used, and I should be able to tell you more about it, but because I was so green to beekeeping at the time, a lot of it went over my head. But the theory is, you block, it's one hive, he puts the queen in the bottom box, and Phil might be able to correct me because I've never done it, put the queen in the bottom box, then you put like a split board in between the bottom box and your top box, and I assume your top box is set up like I just explained with your nurse bees and uncapped brood. But then to get even more bees going into your top box to feed up the cells, you actually block with the cloak board, and it's named after a beekeeper named Kiwi beekeeper, I think, named Harry Cloak. You block the entrance, or sort of semi-block it there, so when they fly in from their foraging, they sort of can't easily get into it, so they follow the board up and into that top entrance on like your split map. And so you end up with a heap of bees, all the field bees, going into your top box. Now, field bees aren't really the ones that you want feeding up your cells, but it obviously can't hurt having a lot of extra bees in there. Helps keep it warm, especially if you're filling out right to the edge. You obviously need a pretty big cluster to keep your cells warm overnight as well.
And the hope is they'll be bringing in lots of pollen and nectar. So the cloak board, you prep like you would a normal one, and you put the board in that day or however many hours before, and it gives that separation of the queen pheromone, so it gives the queenlessness up top. It's like what I did with newspaper, because I'm too lazy to go back 24 hours later and pull out a board. I just put some newspaper in.
We do that at certain times of the year as well, like when you're under the pump in January harvesting honey, we just do the newspaper. yeah, you don't get as good of acceptance, but
Yeah, I've been told that now.
it's a James Jenkins method, and then I learned it from James. Yeah, so the cloak board I think is a pretty efficient system. Yeah, because you do get a heap of bees in there, as I say, they're bringing in the forage. If you want to do any of this sort of stuff at home, and you do require a couple of hives, obviously, at least 2, ideally more. Yeah, you can play around. I Google it, look up different methods. That's sort of in trial and error is the way to go. Although if you get it wrong, you do risk losing a queen. Get something in the wrong place. But there's so many methods, I couldn't go through them all. Yep, so the equipment used, and if you want to check up and look at anything there afterwards, you can. But the main thing's a grafting tool, which there's various different types, as I say. Is that the right word? I think it's called a sable paintbrush, isn't it? They used to use back in the day before we started importing these from China. And the idea is, you're going to have to pick up under the little larvae, which we'll get to in a minute. So, yeah, these Chinese grafting tools are what we use. It's got a wee sort of plunger on it, so you can actually pick up your larvae on the end of it, and then the plunger will come down and push it off into your cell cup for you when the time comes. And it's got a spring release, obviously. So we find they work really well, but some of the older beekeepers are really inclined to use the paintbrushes of it. They seem to know how to do it. Yeah, lighting's important, obviously, to send to your cells, which I'm sure you all know from looking at trying to find the eggs in your hives on an overcast day. It can be difficult, so Laura just does most of our grafting, and she just wears a headlamp, but just any light over the shoulder. Yeah. The cell cups which are there's all sorts of different types. We won't go into too much detail, but these days most commercial people are using those plastic ones, and you can reuse them. We tend to boil them up and clean them and reuse them, but you have to be careful about spreading disease. That we're going in multiple hives. The cell bars for putting the cells on. So yeah, I've just chucked out 8 or whatever on there, but we usually fill up, you get about 15 to 17 on one of these bars, and so every time we do a graft, which I'll carry on explaining in a minute, we usually do about 30 in a graft. That's a good number for a strong hive to try and feed up. But you can obviously easily fit another bar in there and do 45, 50.
To show total ignorance, are they click-in or are they stuck with wax,
Yep.
or how do they actually...
This is the bane of Laura's existence, in that
So those are Bosie cell bars, aren't they?
these are ones from Microtech. Those are bent stainless. Yeah. So they do click in. They've got wee lugs on them, these, and so you just turn them sideways and click the lug in. But you can come and have a closer look. But yeah, click in, click out. But what the bees do is, we've got such a strong hive, as we've explained, to try and grow out your cells. If they get on a flow, they really stick them in there, and they're a prick to get out. And Laura's got, women tend to have good hands for doing a lot of the grafting, and better coordination with smaller hands, but it does make it difficult to twist them off if they're really well stuck on. There's different methods though, that's what we use, and there's other methods where it's a lot easier to click them off, but they are common. That is a problem, getting them off. Yeah, cloak boards, another piece of equipment, pheromone blockers. Phil was talking about, just imagine that's the bottom box in your 2-story hive. He was talking about putting newspaper in between, and then putting your top box with all the young bees and your graft up here. And yeah, the paper idea is it acts as a pheromone blocker. The bees will chew through it and then be able to get up and help feed the graft, but for that first 24 hours it will block a bit of pheromones. The other thing you can do is just put the whole time your graft's in, which is 11 days, so in the hive before they hatch, you can just put a sheet of plywood or something which covers 80% of your hive and obviously prevents a lot of pheromones getting up as well.
As well as the queen excluder to stop the queen?
Yes, always got to have the queen excluder in and separator from your cells. The whole cell raising process, which as I say is 11 days, and I probably should have put the calendar up earlier, but yeah, you have your graft in for 11 days and you've got to make sure you take it out on day 11 before they hatch, or day 10, or any time earlier. Yeah, you need a queen excluder in, because if the queen gets up there, and sometimes there's Bill will be able to test it, you pull your frame out, and it's got, your graft's got nothing on it, and it's because the queen's got up there, yeah, as soon as the queen gets up there, your graft's as good as gone. She'll tear them down, all the bees will just tear them down because she's there. Yeah, newspaper, mesh screen, we actually have a process which I won't go into where we put a mesh screen across and then a box on top, so the bees can't even get out for about 24 hours. It's a different way of doing it. I mean, incubator's key.
So you've got your entrance, do you?
Same entrance.
Yeah, so you put a mesh screen on.
We only leave them in there for 24 hours.
Yeah.
So you've got to be, they can be in there for that long without going outside for their ablutions, so it's not too bad. You don't want to leave them too much longer than that. You can do them, sometimes we do them a bit longer, like 36. But on hot days as well, you've got to be careful about how many you put in there, because obviously they can't fan as well without an entrance. But it's our way of making that box queenless, obviously, with a heap of bees in it. And get that emergency response to raise the cells up. Yeah, but no entrance, completely stuck in there, so all they can do is go to work raising the cells. But yeah, you just got to check the weather forecast, and you don't want to do it if it's going to be 32 degrees or anything like that. And if you make some of that period overnight as well, it's easy. And yeah, incubator, so when you harvest your cells, you've got to keep them at 34 degrees, something like that. It's 32 or 34 degrees, so quite warm, that's your hive temperature. So you get these portable incubators which carry cell. John and Judy Dodson make. They're in somewhere up north, in Wairarapa, I think. And they're quite popular, but you also, some beekeepers will have, the commercial guys will have a converted fridge where they take the refrigeration unit out of it and put some sort of heater in it, a lamp or something, and that can store a heap of cells in it. So whatever it is, you need to keep them at that warm temperature before you get them into their final destination. They can drop down a bit, and it just tends to delay their hatching. So the colder it is, the longer they'll take to hatch. As I say, they should emerge on day 11 after you graft. But if I've heard of beekeepers who lose power overnight on a cold night, and the cells will still hatch. But it delays it by 12, 24 hours, something like that. So the colder it is, the more delayed your hatching is. I don't know exactly if it does any damage to your bee. I don't think it's too bad, depending on how cold it gets. But yeah, they will die sometimes if they get too cold. So that's why you have the incubator.
And overheating?
Yeah, which we always worry about. As I said earlier, we send our queens all around the country with fencing post, and you worry about them overheating and that. I'm supposed to keep them in conditioned cab or whatever of your truck, and they tend to. It seems to go pretty well, but you do worry about it because that's actually a worse issue. I'm talking about, mated queens there, obviously going in the post. But yeah, cells, as well, Phil, overheating. I'm sure Phil's told me off before for leaving the incubator in the sun or something on the passenger seat of the truck. I know Laura has. So yeah, you have to be careful where you leave that incubator. If it's a 20-odd degree day and you leave it on the passenger seat, it will overheat, and that's going to do more damage. That will kill your cells rather than just delay them. So that's what you really need to avoid. And I mean, the only issue I know of this here, leaving it in the sun's a real issue, isn't it? Yeah. You just got to be mindful of it.
I knew you'd get to the point. Just the one.
Yeah. There's some improper use of the grafting tool.
You should have the cleaner.
That's what Laura said. I ran Laura through this before I went and said, tell me what's wrong. And that was the only thing I think she corrected me on. She said, yeah, often between your eggs, your larvae, your grafting, you will just want to make sure it's clean. So, I mean, you've only had royal jelly or whatever on it, so you can just clean it off in your mouth. So maybe that's what our little apprentice is doing there. Okay, step 3, once we got up to that, obviously we prepared the hive. So now, 24 hours later, you're actually going to go through the process of grafting, and I guess it's a big, complicated sort of period of the whole process. So you've got to select an appropriate frame from your breeder queen, your stud queen. So you want 3-day-old larvae. Got a slide coming up will display, but basically 3-day-old larvae, and you can Google this as well, there's plenty of images, but it's when it goes from the egg, which is a little line you can obviously, or dot, you can see in the cell, to just forming that small seed larvae shape. So that's a perfect age to be able to, one, pick up, but two, it's still young enough for the bees to then feed up royal jelly and turn into a queen bee rather than just a worker. So what you're picking up, these eggs, would otherwise probably just be turned into workers, but because you're giving them the environment where the bees want a new queen, they then feed them a heap of royal jelly and turn them into queens. But yeah, so it's just any old egg off the frame. Obviously, if it's you don't want a droney frame or anything, and your breeder queen isn't going to be obviously a heap of drones anyway. You're going to choose a good frame with our fertilised worker eggs. Yeah, you want a lot of royal jelly. You want your breeder queen to be on a decent flow or be stimulated, so she's producing a bit of royal jelly, because you don't want to be obviously grafting a dry sort of larvae. It's difficult, but also it's not going to be well fed in those first 3 days of its life anyway. So you want them surrounded in royal jelly. You remove the grafting tool, remove the larvae off the grafting tool, place it in the cell cup. So it's a tricky bit. So it's like I described earlier. Sort of hard to explain unless you actually do it, or as I say, I mean, watching it online is probably the best way to see that. But yeah, until you do it, it's really hard to learn. The only way to learn, obviously, is to do it in real trial and error. Like you might get 1 out of 15 or whatever on your first go. You might get 10. But if you keep doing it, most people will sort of, get the feel of it. Even I can get about 60% now, and I'm pretty clumsy. Yeah, as I said earlier, you can fit about 15 cells on those sort of standard size bars. If you've got a good strong hive, you can do 3 of those bars on the frame and in the hive. Yeah, you graft once you've, so I'll have some photos coming up, but you tend to just have that bar sitting down like that on the table in front of you as you're grafting, and yeah, frame in front of that, so leaning up against that box, you could scoop them out, put it in it as you go. Once you've done your 15, you pick it up, put it on there. Once you've done that and you've got your graft ready to go in the hive, you go outside to that hive you've prepared 24 hours earlier, your cell raiser. Depending on what method you're doing it, you might have manipulated it in other ways on this day. That mesh screen we were talking about, we'd probably set that up 2 hours before the graft goes in as well. So then those bees stuck in that box would be queenless for 2 hours, so they really want a queen. Whatever you're doing, it's going into your box or whatever that's definitely queenless, or the queen can't get through the excluder. So like I say, they will, go to this actually, so there's a photo of slightly different age larvae. The one you want to graft from is, you tell me Phil, probably I need to point it, don't I?
I'll probably go middle right.
Yeah, middle right. The one in the bottom right you could potentially do, but it's going to be difficult to pick up. It's quite young, but yeah, middle right's a perfect one. I think if you go middle left, you might get away with it, but it's slightly old, isn't it, Phil?
Yeah, I would go for it, but
Yeah.
be aware that your graft might come out that little bit earlier than you're expecting it to.
Yeah, it's good advice. Things to be aware of. Because if your graft hatches early and you haven't taken it out, as we explained earlier, one virgin will hatch and you and go along and tear down all your other cells, and you end up with one virgin. Oh, that's what a short man needs. Good one, pretty good one, but yeah, these other ones are probably, like that one's sort of too old, and it's tempting on a hot day when you're sweating away doing it, it's tempting to pick that one up. It's real easy to pick up, but it probably won't work.
You can kind of see that it's already eaten into a lot of its royal jelly, and it's probably possibly been started to be fed honey and pollen, which actually stops it being such a good queen. So something about queens is they're pretty much only, young larvae are only fed royal jelly for a start, and as soon as they start getting fed honey and pollen, that stops them wanting to be queens. Something like that.
Yeah, it's that change in diet just determines everything. It means they can't develop the ovaries or whatever to turn them into a queen. Or if they get fed royal jelly, they can develop those ovaries. It's an amazing process, really. But you start seeing, and you'll see it in other diagrams of larvae you're looking in any bee books or online, they start to get the segmentation in that larva, you know, the wee bands, which you can slightly see coming through then. That's, yeah, when it's too old, you want it. It's that skinny little seed without segmentation. So that's the process of a graft. Again, this one's in Ireland, but when you're on holiday, you tend to take photos. So I've got photos of it. Yeah, Laura's using a lamp there rather than a head torch. Oh no, she's got a head torch in one. I think she got sick of the lamp and said, have you got a head torch? But yeah, on his bars he's only got, what's that, 7 per bar there. So yeah, everyone's different, does it different ways. He also had the angriest bees I've ever seen. Because you've got to be pretty aggressive to get out in the Irish weather, I think. So, yeah, that's sort of the technique you use for the grafting tool. Laura's hand, she's got her finger on the end for poking it down, and when it comes time to push it off into the cell cup. And then, yeah, head torch, looking at getting that light right. But yeah, you want to angle the frame up slightly like she is as well. Obviously it makes looking into it easier, which I guess naturally you do when you're looking for a beagle. I was thinking hand and queen cells, and we've gone into that a bit. The next slide I've got the ages, so I'll go to that. Don't know how well we can see that, but yeah, this is a really key. I like this one because I mean it's what we all need to inherently know as beekeepers basically is, you know, different ages when you look at the brood and when things are going to hatch. So I do believe, I'm guessing that dotted line is when things are capped. Oh no, capped is there. Oh, this is when they're similar ages. So everything takes a bit longer to hatch. So you've got your drone, which is the longest of all, 24 days. Your worker bees, 21, is it? Yeah. And your queens only, so if it's day 16, I can sometimes be confusing in that I tend to talk in days after graft. So I say they hatch on day 11, which will be day 14. That's sort of a safety procedure in case you've grafted some older ones or it's been warm weather for whatever reason I've developed a bit quicker. So that's when I tend to pretend like they hatch. But yeah, they're the different ages and stages, I guess. It's key to know, and the thing is with the queens, that's what I was getting to it, they're capped on day 9, so I normally say 5.5 days after you graft them, because of course they're 3 days old, as you can see there when you graft them. So yeah, about day 9 they're capped, so actually at that point you can take them out of your hive and harvest them, and, either put them into the hives you want to, or store them in portable incubator, or if you're a commercial or bigger fridge, heated fridge.
Still call it an incubator.
Yeah.
I've got an incubator in my lab and it's a scope fridge with just a different thermostat.
Yeah. We actually haven't got it. We've actually relied on using one of those portable ones until now. I just last week bought a chicken egg incubator off Trade Me, which I'm going to try and make work, and that goes to 30 odd degrees and has a thermostat.
Yeah,
so,
should work fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a matter of keeping it warm, and it's obviously not that hot, 30 odd degrees.
Just make sure if it's a chicken egg one that doesn't shake.
Oh, you're supposed to shake eggs to wake them up or something, eh?
You're supposed to shake them so they don't set.
Oh yeah, it's got some sort of, I haven't plugged it in and played with it yet.
Because the bees mightn't like that so much.
No, they don't. Where do I say? Second point there, careful handling, especially at early stages. One of my first days beekeeping was when Laura was working for Taylor Pass Honey Company, and they were, I came out and gave her a hand harvesting some cells on a weekend, and my job was to sit in the passenger seat. It was a bumpy track, it wasn't a great place for a cell raising yard because you had to bump in and out of it. But yeah, I wasn't allowed to shake the incubator at all, and she was way too harsh on me. You can't, obviously they're in a foam sleeve. You usually put them into a foam sleeve, so you can move them around a bit. But I think she was trying to teach me to be gentle, so it pays to be. Kept at day 5.5, so you can take them out any time after that. I guess they're more susceptible to temperature extremes at those younger ages. When they're older, that's like, I gave the example earlier that a guy's incubator went off overnight and they still survived. Well, they probably would have been sort of a day off hatching, potentially already. Yeah, 34 degrees is sort of a hive temperature. We've gone through all of that. Yeah, look through that. Like I say, that is a good one to print out and sort of just have for quick reference. I mean, you should inherently know all of it, but as you can see me stumbling over it before, sometimes you can't remember the exact thing. So yeah, there's a graph as you're pulling it out. You can see in that picture of a hive there, where it's come out in the middle of a hive. So yeah, the hive was set up 11 days earlier or whatever, 12 days earlier to have all those nurse bees there. I've obviously that brood now that was uncapped then was capped, as you usually cap now either side of it, but I've fed up your cells, I've capped them, and that's, I think I did that graph, so that's a picture of a happy me holding it.
It's a bloody excellent graph.
I don't know, I said to Laura, I don't know if that photo actually corresponds with the graph I'm holding, but we won't zoom up on the one I'm holding. It's pretty similar.
Well, the one you're holding looks better.
Yeah, it might, maybe that's why we took the photo. I think I got my paperwork confused, my notes confused, and it's probably one Laura did. But yeah, you can say get none if there's a queen in there, or even if you don't do your grafting right, obviously it's a fiddly job, you can still get none, but yeah, you can obviously get 100% as well. It's not rare, but it's usually for some reason 1 or 2, even if you are a good grafter, that doesn't take. So I think I was giving an example to Dion earlier, we tend to, when we're doing our planning, working on getting about a 60% sort of take on your grafts from a commercial point of view, but often you're probably more likely to get 70 or 80%, but you stuff up one of the hives, there's a Beaver virgin queen in it or something, which gives you a 0, and that brings your percentage down. So yeah, the commercial guys sort of on a normal graph will be aiming for 70, 80, into the 90s once you get into good spring flows. Yeah, so then we're getting towards the end now. I'm not sure how my time's going.
Yeah.
Geez, I've been talking that long.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got yourselves a portable incubator to take them out to your mating yard. So basically, it's the next step. And so a mating yard is, from a commercial point of view, is a set of hives. They're usually miniature hives, they're the nukes. And I've got some photos there. We use nukes, but we've also got these. If I put it up this way, it should be right. These three-way units, which a lot of commercials use. So it's a standard size honey box and everything, but there's routes down where these dividers are. And it's a divider to turn it into 3 different colonies in there. And you have a mat, like a carpet mat, which sits down hard on the top to stop the bees going between. You also have a base with runners that this divider matches up with. So anyway, the whole point is to make 3 different compartments, because for mating purposes you actually only need small hives. It's just a temporary home for a month while your queen does her thing, your virgin queen does her thing, and then starts laying for you to assess. So some beekeepers do 2 ways, some do 3 ways, some even, I think, then somehow manage to, have half size frames, do 6-way sort of units, but that seems complicating it to me. So we tend to use 3 ways, or we just use those Hive Doctor core flute nuke boxes. And yeah, a yard, an apiary, which, what have I got there? I'm not sure why I've gone into cells. But anyway, you want your mating yards to be in an area of settled weather, because we talked about earlier, you need good weather. If it's too windy or your virgins get lost or they don't want to leave home, and the drones don't want to leave home. Yeah, you'll see we've actually got an apiary on the, as you go through Kaituna to Nelson on the corner of Lambert's Road, we've got an apiary just in the paddock there, and we tried it as a mating yard last spring, and we got like 10% matings or something, when really you want 60, 70, 80 in good weather. It was just too windy coming through around Davis's cutting there, and through the Kaituna, it's too windy. So yeah, you get a bad spot like that and you'll get next to no matings because they just won't leave home. So you need a good spot for matings, good calm weather. You also want a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, other hives around to provide those drones. And not only does it give you, an abundance of drones, because the queen will mate with so many, you want genetic diversity. So you bear that in mind as well. If someone's running someone's running a lot of Carniolans and you're trying to breed Italians or vice versa, you want to keep it away. Or if you've got a property where you can control what drones are going to be around, you sort of do that, and just be mindful of what drones you think will be around. But most of the bigger commercials around here are running Italians, so we don't mind sharing genetics. We just look for sites of other. Because it's so populated with hives here, it's not great for honey production or anything else, putting honey hives there, but because there's so many hives, it is good for breeding queens or getting mating, so that's what we sort of look for in those areas.
So you must have hives that you're constantly making your nukes, or so sort of donor hives that are just there to make these up for the queens?
Yes, and it's sort of your risk is a disease risk in it because you're sharing brood around, and like I say, different beekeepers have different ways of doing it. We tend to stick to everything full depth because some beekeepers use things called polynukes, which are like really mini hives of specialised here. So we can go and pinch one of these frames out of another honey hive and put it in here, but we're not constantly making them up per se. When you have a failed mating, when you come back after a month after putting your cells in and now she hasn't mated, obviously your hives hasn't had a queen for a month and she's dwindled. The hive has dwindled at that point, and you do have to make it up. What we try to do is look in the compartment next door, hopefully she's mated and has laid a lot of brood, and you can sort of swap that over and try to make it up on site to minimise your disease risk. But you are sort of always juggling frames around, and that's the big management when it comes to queen breeding. It takes a lot of time to manage your mating units and keep them strong, because of course, like anything, if you have a strong unit, you will get better matings as well. But more workers to look after the queen and support her and feed her and get her on a flow, get the hive on a flow. So keeping that strength up is a challenge, and you do have to bring brood in sometimes. When we were, me and Phil were at Putaki together and Laura was doing the queens, there was a few days she said, look, my mating units are getting too weak, you guys need to go out to your honey hives and bring me back some brood. So we'd go and harvest brood and bring it back. So there's a bit of that goes on for sure.
Anyway, you don't need to do all that. I was told this joker used to take a nail clipper with him, and if the queen was getting a bit old, he'd clip a leg off the queen, and after a while the bees thought, oh, the queen's not doing the job, so they make a new queen, kill that one off.
That does work. That's the supersedure response he's sort of going for. I can't say I've known anyone to do it, but in theory it will work. In theory it might work because the bees naturally, obviously in the natural state, they've survived all these years without humans, they will do things like supersede themselves and survive. Hence why they have the swarming instinct. What a lot of beekeepers want, especially those guys who are chasing high value manuka, is they want really productive queens. So they want to buy off somebody who they sort of trust the breeding program of, to, for us to select good breeder queens. Or a lot of the big guys do it themselves, obviously, have their own breeding program where they select from their best hybrid breeder queens. Have you ever got those genetics coming through? If you're doing things like that in a commercial sense, I'm talking now, obviously, they're not necessarily building their good genetics up within their business, because basically if you did that to every queen would raise their own queen, and they wouldn't necessarily be the best you could get.
So, as a hobbyist, I've done some pauper splits, and I know they don't work well in spring and Turmarina. That I'm more likely to have a success in summer. But that's always just going to give me one more if, because it doesn't always work. This is really interesting to see, because this is really how the only way of increasing hive numbers.
In terms of, it is a really good way to increase your hive numbers is with one of these mated queens, and that's how we got to the stage where we only bought 4 hives off John Blaylock, local beekeeper, and they were good hives, but then we split up, and we went from 4 to 60 or something in 1 year, then 60 to 150, but it was because we didn't worry about honey take, and the main reason what I'm getting to is we did it because we would make splits and put a mated queen in. So the thing with like doing that pauper thing is you have you do it, and then you've got 16 days until she hatches, because they obviously choose an egg, feed it up, or 14 days, because they're going to choose an older egg. Yeah, so you've got your 14 days there, and then you've got your mating, which will take, I'll sort of get to in a minute, or got there, you know, it takes sort of 3 to 5 weeks. Meanwhile, you've got nobody laying in your hives dwindling, so your strength goes down. So yes, it is a slower way to build up your hives, whereas, and that's the reason why a lot of the commercial beekeepers will buy queens of us. It's not for rear-queening, it's for making up deads in springtime, or it's for building up numbers in autumn time. They will do splits with mated queens, and you bang one of these in, and you know she's going to lay, once they release her from the candy, but she'll lay within 24 hours. So I guess that's, yeah, the flip side of that, and why the commercial guys can't afford to wait that long, sort of thing. And yeah, you have the risk of not having matings. I mean, the other way to do it is you make a split, obviously, with the cell. That's what probably more beekeepers do. It's only since more money's come into the industry of Manuka honey that people have been willing to pay 50, 60 bucks for one of these mated queens. They used to just do it all with cells. They might have had some mating units like this, but mainly they'd just make a split, put a cell in it, and some would work, some wouldn't. Yeah, add a cell, but yeah, protect it off. That's the other thing I talked about earlier. So it's all right if your hive's queenless, it knows it's queenless, it'll accept the cell, but if, say, you make up a fresh unit from a hive, and yeah, they're used to having a queen because they've just come out of a queen right hive, and you put a cell in, they might not accept it. So we tend to just wrap some insulating tape around our hive. You can also put a bit of alkathene piping on it or something to protect it, because it'll stop then the worker bees tearing it down from the side and removing the queen before she hatches, if they're not ready for it. Yeah, cross fingers are there. Like I say, it's all weather dependent. You can you learn to pick your sites and, you know, pick all those things. And the other thing I briefly mentioned is you do also have drone hives, which you usually put in your mating yards. So that's a hive or two, which acts as a support hive for giving brood, as Dion mentioned earlier. You do need that sometimes. Sometimes in springtime, Phil will probably be able to tell you do sometimes tap them out pretty hard, trying to make up your mating units. But it also has one of the green drone frames in it you can buy from the suppliers, so it's fully capped with drone brood. And you try to, from a commercial point of view, you try to make her a good queen, but you want to get her genetics, because she's going to be, you're going to end up with a whole frame of drones right in your mating yard, so chances are some of them are going to mate with your virgins. So you want her having good genetics too. So that helps boost your drone numbers. So then this is, yeah, the caging process. Yeah, you can see in the photo on the right there's some, yeah, just hive doctor nukes we use as mating units. It takes a bit longer to find your queen in them when there's 5 full big frames. Whereas if you've got a smaller setup like some beekeepers do, it's a lot quicker to find your queen, which obviously is important. The other ones are the single brood box hives with little Gemma helping me there, is the 3-way mating units out in the field. So I've got them on a base, just like a wooden base with 3 runners, as I mentioned earlier, to match up with these dividers, and sitting on a pallet.
Go and work in the rain, do you, Paddy?
That was early days when we were working for Putaki 5 days a week, and we needed to try and build up these hive numbers, and we were doing it on the weekend. And so if it was raining on the weekend, it was just a matter of caging. All we were doing was caging those queens, I think, to put in something.
You do it whenever the cells come out, don't you?
Yeah, we were doing it when the cells were due to go in, which obviously would time for a weekend. And yeah, we need to do it when we had time. So no, we don't make a habit of it. And there was a reason she took a photo of me, because it was probably, look how silly this guy is. But no, don't make a habit of it. But I was here just trying to find photos on my computer this morning. That's why this one's a bit fuzzy. I don't know what's been taken off, but yeah, that's just a mating yard of lots of nukes. Right, yeah, a big thing is assessing your queens, and John mentioned that he sort of wanted me to speak to this, and that it's probably the biggest part of beekeeping, right, is every time you go for a hive, you're basically assessing your queen. Obviously you've got your hive health issues as well, your varroas, your AFBs, anything else you might be able to pick up, but the most common and most important common thing to check for is obviously your queen's doing well. So that's important. So we've come and put our protected cell in or whatever here, left it for 3 to 5 weeks to depending on the weather, you know, if it's good hot weather in late spring, summer, she might mate in like 2 to 3 weeks. They can do it really quickly sometimes. So yeah, we come back and we check our frames, and obviously these are just foundation frames, but so we're going through and we're assessing. First we're looking for eggs, obviously, to check there is a mated queen that's actually laying in there. Then you usually go to your middle one and see that's where the cat brood will be, because she's usually started laying there first. But we always want to wait for cat brood before we cage our queen for use elsewhere. And why do we do that? Someone tell me why can't, as soon as I see her laying some eggs, why can't I just cage her and use her and know she's good?
You want to see that they develop?
Yeah. Well, you want to see her develop into like worker brood rather than drone brood. Yeah. Because, as I say, this is fraught, and sometimes they'll get partially mated, and they will lay eggs. Sometimes if you wait 5 weeks, they seem to just turn into drone layers, and even though they haven't mated at all, they start filling out and they look like big queens, and otherwise look perfect. And they also lay perfect because they've developed big bodies which make them lay nicely in the bottom of the cell. But it's all droning. And I've had some really nice looking queens who do that, and their laying pattern's beautiful. You think, oh, she's hit every cell on this frame, you know, it's going to be beautiful. You pull out the next frame and it's all drones. It looks like one of your green frames. She's just not fertilised. So yeah, if you just assess just on eggs, that's the risk you run. Sometimes on our own, like before we sell anything, obviously we wait to see the nice flat worker brood, and I've got some slides I'll show you. Sometimes if we're just using them in our own hives, you know, we might just cage it on eggs if I'm missing a queen or something, take the risk. But yeah, before we sell anything, we want to make sure she's well fertilised and laying worker bees as well as drones. So, yes, yeah, the beekeepers have seen a few, yeah, no, that's ugly. So I found this online and it said it's a drone layer, could also be a worker bee, but either way they're pretty dodgy looking cells. I'd expect a few of them for AFB probably as well, being with some sort of dark sunken caps there. We'll have a look. So you probably pick a few out and see how they're going. But anyway, whether it's AFB or not, it's definitely a drone layer, all that bulbous. And again, this is one you can Google or YouTube or whatever, all those bulbous cells are the drone cells, obviously. So that one, she's not even partially mated, something's seriously gone wrong there. Some you'll see as flat patches and then bulbous patches, and that's I think when she's only mated with 4 or 5 drones and not 12. But I mean, like I say, this is, when you're beekeeping, I think this is the main thing. A lot of beginner beekeepers just love finding the queen. They say to me, oh, can we find the queen? And I say, you don't need to find the queen. All you're doing basically is looking for her eggs, and then as importantly as looking for eggs is, once it's capped, yeah, is it a drone or is it a worker? Because you want them laying workers, obviously. A laying worker though, we'll get to that. Speaking of laying workers, yeah. So this is when that one I just showed you, a drone layer, might have been a queen there, but not very well fertilised, so she's just laying droney. But this, when you see this many eggs in one cell, is usually a laying worker, and you see some of them even develop to larvae, sort of in the same cell. That's when your hive's been queenless for a long time, and there's no pheromones from a queen in the hive, and a worker bee will actually develop. She develops ovaries to lay eggs, but they're unfertilised. Obviously, she hasn't been out on a mating flight, like we've just explained. You have to do. So she just lays a heap of eggs, and they'll lay a heap in one cell like that. So that's the clue. The other complicated thing is sometimes if you have a newly mated queen who's really keen and ready to go and actually lay good eggs, and you put her in too tight a space, she likes to work. She'll start doubling up and laying 2 eggs in one cell. So you just got to be aware that for the most part, if you're seeing multiple eggs in the cell, especially in a big hive like most of you will have, you know, full size hive, it's because it's gone queenless. And the reason why the worker bee is able to develop ovaries and actually lay those unfertilised droney eggs is the rest of the time, if there is a queen there, her pheromones actually, there's a chemical reaction in it, and Dion should be able to explain this better than me, but it prevents the other bees' ovaries from growing, the worker bees' ovaries from growing and laying those eggs. So yeah, the pheromones while they'll also, effectively a smell. A simple way for us to think about it. There is also chemical things going on.
There is signal controlling the physiological state of the workers.
Yeah. So I think that's amazing that it prevents their ovaries from growing effectively. So that's a terrible state to get to. You don't want it because how do you treat for it when you get a laying worker like that? You sort of got to put brood in to strengthen the hive obviously, but also the brood helps give that pheromone of it. And ideally you want to bang the bees outside to get rid of that laying worker, that she can be aggressive and they can reject a virgin or a queen cell or a mated queen you put in. So you've actually got to bang your bees out. You also got, it's not a very fun job, but you want to scrape back those frames because otherwise it's going to be drony forever. If you just leave your frame like that and put it back in, even with a good mated queen, she'll just lay drones in it because they've probably blown out the cells. Right? So it's a messy job when you get one of those laying workers because you hope she hasn't laid on too many frames, but if she's laid any frame she's laid that on, you've got to scrape it back. Ugly. So yeah, laying workers, which are just workers, then you've got drone layer queens, which actually look like normal queens, so they're disappointing. But there's your alternative. So that's the brood you want to look for when we're doing our assessment after 3 to 5 weeks. I'm sure you all know it looks like flat worker brood. You want your queen, that's a signal she's well fertilised.
And you've got nice pictures of marked queens in both those photos.
Yeah.
Red and white, less and white.
And you don't have to, but we tend to mark all our queens because, obviously any we're selling, we mark, it's sort of part of our supply. So yeah, these well-laid eggs as opposed to the laying worker frame I just showed you. Just one egg in the middle of a cell. That's what you want to see in any good hive. Plus it shows you that the queen's been there that day. That's the other thing I say, you don't need to find your queen, because I know if the queen's been in there or not. As beekeepers we know just by the age of the larvae or the eggs, right? So you never have to actually see your queen, you can sort of just figure it out on how fresh the laying is. Right, you can find queen, pick her up by the wings, pinch between your thumb and forefinger, and mark her, and there's different ways to hold her to mark her. And put her in the cages I got there. There's various different types of cages. She goes in the, you have it open like that, she goes in there so it's easy, and she will try to scuttle away sometimes, so it pays to hold her over your hive. Close that, and then you want to put 8 to 12 escorts in there. Same thing, you pick them up by their wings with your forefinger and you poke them head first. That's the way I do it anyway, into there, and give them a tap on the bum to push them in. They tend to go in head first. Once you've got 8 to 12, close it up, and that's effectively a mated queen. If you've done your assessment right, that can go in any split or requeen or anything. So that's what we sell. Selecting appropriate nurse and escort bees. You want to get young ones because they are the ones who would actually tend to the queen. Their job in there is obviously to keep the queen alive, feed her the queen candy that's in the end, which is a mix of ice and sugar and water basically. So they need to look after her. So you want young bees, you get them off that uncapped brood frame ideally, and you can sort of tell what a young bee is. It's usually fluffier, its wings aren't frayed from flying, it's got fresh wings. Sometimes the wings are even sort of a bit more stuck together. You put them in by the entrance, which sometimes becomes the exit if you're having a bad day, and you end up having to put about 20 in to get your 10, because they do like coming out. Store them, if you do it yourself, or if you buy a queen off someone or a given one, make sure you store it away from insecticides. In a lot of our houses these days we have those automatic fly things, so you just got to be aware if you've got them in one of your rooms, don't leave your bee out there. But we have them in our house, but I store our bees in the hot water cylinder cupboard, away from it, where that mist's not going to get to it, and they're fine. So hot water cylinder cupboards are a good place to store them. It's a good temperature, especially on a cold spring night. Feed a drop of water daily. The way you do that is just put your finger under the tap or in a cup of water or something, and then just touch it on. So just a drop goes on there. And you actually see, you can watch it, the worker bees will come up and poke their tongues out and have a drink of the water. Proboscis. They have a drink. Is that a video or a photo? Anyway, that's us caging Queen. We help her again. I think we only take photos when Gemma's out helping us, so that's why she shows up so much.
5,
Oh, there's a video.
6,
It's a lot cuter if you can hear her counting.
7.
And then she gets to about 8 and says,
Well,
stop
you can do the
counting.
counting,
I'll
To make sure I get what number's that?
So I have to guess from there.
Cool. Okay, that's enough then.
Right, yeah, and colours, as Dio mentioned earlier, mark him easy identification, obviously in the hive, which I say you don't need to find the queen, but of course if you're doing a split or something, as we all know, there are times when you do want to find her. But it also helps you age your queen, and some beekeeping operations that's important, and sort of hobbyist setups it probably is quite important, so you know if she's dispersed or not. Obviously you want to know the history of your queen more in that situation, even some commercials do. So yeah, different colours, different years, white, yellow, red, green, blue, and you see that acronym, whatever it is, abbreviation, will you raise good bees, to remember it. But then someone's done up that nice chart for us as well, which I like. Not sure how that helps you remember it, but she's obviously a beekeeping fan. And that must be about time, I reckon. She just put us ready. Yep. So, as I say, from an Apiaries, where we are maiden and virgin queens, queen cells, new hives and pollination needs, but also, yeah, we've got our magazine that, yeah, if anyone wants to subscribe, it's free. It's just full of beekeeping stories each month, comes in on my email. And we're also doing a printed magazine next month, which is the highlights from the last 6 months, so that'll be quite a big sort of 50-page one, if anyone wants to purchase a copy. Thank you for your time. I'll hang around so you can look through any of this that you want to.
Oh, well, on behalf of the club, thank you, Paddy, for coming on.